All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is our second ever virtual program from the Garden Club of Jacksonville. We're so pleased to have you here today, and we're really excited to have Joshua Rosenberg of NativeJax here. We'll introduce him in just a little bit. And we wanted to start things off because it's always fun. Oh, I should introduce myself. I'm Denise Reagan. I'm the Executive Director of the Garden Club of Jacksonville. And I'm here with Damian Lamar Robinson, who's our Operations Manager. Hi, Damian.
Hey, guys. Hi, Denise.
And we are so pleased to be here. And we thought it's always nice to get a little audience participation right off the bat. Oh, I am so crazy because I forgot to thank somebody that we cannot do this without. The Jesse Ball DuPont Fund graciously helped us get these virtual programs started, and we're very grateful to them for helping us out. Thank you to the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. Now we are going to do a poll, and I'm going to launch that. And so now you can vote. How much are garden pests bugging you? Let us know. If your answer is other, please type your answer in the chat. We're about 50% voted. About 70% of the way there. Getting a lot of responses here. All right, so I'm going to end the poll because it looks like everybody has voted. And I'm going to share the results. Damian, tell us how people voted.
Oh, well, an overwhelming response of us all feel like our gardens have escaped destruction for now. So that's great. And followed by some people have the plants have managed. There's a few plants that have managed to do well on their own.
All right. And we have, two people who say, they're eating everything. Help. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing that. You may need to end the poll on your own screens. But now we're going to get started with an introduction of Joshua Rosenberg. Josh is a Jacksonville native, a graduate of the University of North Florida's International Business Program. Let's hear a swoop. The permaculture designer, owner of NativeJax Permaculture Design and Real Estate, lover of all things outdoors, and dedicated to creating a more resilient lifestyle in the community. Joshua is joining us tonight live from the Riverside Avondale Community Garden, which is across from Willow Branch Library. And Josh has started his own company, as I said, the NativeJax Permaculture Design and Real Estate. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go along. And we're so excited to have him here today. I wanted to mention that we'll be taking questions all throughout the program. And the way we want your questions to come to us is through the chat. So if something occurs to you as Josh is speaking, just go ahead and type it in the chat. And throughout the program, Damian will wrestle those questions and toss them up to Josh to try to answer. So please make sure you do that. But now, Joshua, please take it away.
Hey, Denise. Yes, thank you, Denise and Damian and the Garden Club for allowing me to do this presentation today. So I really appreciate that. You know, it's getting to be that time of summer or that time of year where the pests are going to start coming in. It's getting really hot. And so why not just use pesticides? Why not just make it easy and go to the store and buy some pesticides and put them on your plants and apparently cure everything, right? Well, I'll tell you one thing. All pests have natural enemies that keep them in check to create a balanced ecosystem. And that's an important aspect of having a healthy garden, is to have a balanced ecosystem. It's insects are an essential part of maintaining a healthy ecosystem, and without insects, we would have very little variety of food that would grow. There would be basically no pollination, no ability to compost, nobody would be able to eat all the waste that we produce, decompose anything, and we would not have healthy soil to keep us fed and healthy. So why do we need fertilizers? When did fertilizers start becoming this thing? Well, it mainly began in farms, and before fertilizers were abundantly used on farms, farmers had these natural hedgerows, which are basically just areas they left wild on the sides and on the back around their field. They had all these natural areas that they just let grow. For some reason, they decided to cut those down, probably on the advice of somebody. And once they did, they got rid of all the habitat for all those insects, killing the environment for those insects to live. And then they had all these pests problems occur. And what happened to solve that problem? They started using chemicals. And these aren't just chemicals that were made for these pest problems. These are chemicals that were left over from warfare, from actual war, that they were leftover chemicals that they decided to use for fertilizers and for pest control biocides. So according to the USDA, USDA disease and insect damage to farms jumped from 7% to 14% once they just cut down the hedgerows, which is a huge jump, and it's actually still growing today because a lot of these farms still are depending mostly on fertilizers and biocides to grow crop to have something to sell. So instead of literally just allowing these hedgerows to regrow, they decided to use these chemicals, and they're basically fighting nature. And you can't fight nature and win. You'll never win. Nature will always, nature's so resilient, it will always combat us and win. So using chemical fertilizers and biocides in your garden to deter pests is a very temporary and devastating solution. In fact, using these chemicals will actually create an adverse effect, exploding your pest population instead of reducing it. And they'll also reduce the beneficial insect population, ultimately killing your soil health. So your garden needs really healthy soil to be pest-free, to be disease-free, and the more you add these fertilizers and pesticides or biocides, really, then the more you're killing your soil health. So that's why you shouldn't use pesticides. And then I think we go into beneficial insects. So how do we combat these problems that occur, these pests that are going to come to our garden and take over our food, right? So we try to attract beneficial insects, and really every insect is beneficial. Every insect plays a role in keeping the environment balanced, and that's how you stop having these pest problems and disease problems. So a couple beneficial insects that you want to keep an eye out for and attract to your garden would be ladybugs. Most people know ladybugs eat aphids, but it's actually not the adult ladybug that eats aphids. It's going to be the larvae that eat the aphids. So you want to have a ladybug population, and what attracts ladybugs are nectar and pollen from pollinator flowers. So the more flowers you have, specifically, there are specific flowers that you could have in your garden that I'll talk about a little bit later that will attract these specific bugs to your garden. They seem to like these specific flowers. But ladybugs are one, they eat aphids, they eat mites, soft-body insects, and they overwinter in protected places like leaf litter and rocks. And they can eat up to 50 to 500 aphids per day. So attract the ladybugs, get them out there, and you'll start seeing a reduction in your aphid population. A couple other insects that you want to see around your garden are ground beetles, those guys with the hard shells. And they like to feed on potato beetle eggs and other beetle eggs. Another beetle is a rove beetle. And rove beetles like to eat cabbage maggots, onion maggots, other root crop maggots. So if you see these guys running around, they're protecting your root crops. And they're, you know, like with the ladybug, the larva is going to be the one that's really doing all the eating, but you want to see the beetles around so that they're creating larvae. Then we have lacewings, which I'm sure everyone has seen, and they are really really attack aphids, mealybugs, thrips, caterpillars, and their eggs, mites, and scales. And if you ever see a little kind of cobweb, a yellow cobweb inside of a leaf, that the leaf is kind of folded in, that's a lacewing larvae in there. So don't pluck the leaves, just let it be there, let the lacewings hatch and eat all your pests. Then we get into some kind of scarier beneficial insects, the yellow jackets. These are colony-forming predator wasps, and they prey on caterpillars. So if you don't want caterpillars, you want to try and get some plants that attract the yellow jackets. They are scary, but they do provide you know, a really good function. The paper wasps they're also colony forming. They create the little kind of paper mache looking houses, and they prey on caterpillars as well. So those are the yellow jackets, and the paper wasps are the bigger of the wasps. All these other ones are going to be really small wasps that you probably will never even see, and you know, they're going to be doing a lot of good for you. So this is a digger wasp. This is a solitary predator wasp, so it's going to be on its own, not really going to have a whole bunch around. They're going to be on the ground mostly, and they prey on weevils, crickets, like lubbers, and caterpillars. And again, like the ladybugs, the wasps, the adult wasps will feed on pollen and nectar to survive when it's actually their larvae. They eat all the predatory or predators. And they like composite flowers like daisies, chamomile, and mint. So then we have these three calcifications, which are really small. You can see how small that little guy is, a braconid. And they lay their eggs on or in cabbage worms, tomato hornworms, and caterpillars. So these guys actually put their eggs right on top or inside of the pest. And once they hatch, the pest will no longer live. So then we have the calcides, which is 1/32 of an inch, super small, and they prey on mealybugs, aphids, the larvae of moths, beetles, and butterflies. I love butterflies. I don't hope they wouldn't eat the butterflies in my garden, but you know, it's a circle of life, so can't decide what they want to eat and what they don't want. And then this last wasp is the ichneumoniid, which I have a hard time pronouncing. And it has an ovipositor off the back there, and that is where this particular wasp will lay its eggs inside or on top of larvae, and really kind of do the damage with the eggs, as opposed to eating them like the first ones I talked about. So those are a couple beneficial insects that you want to see around your garden. If you see some wasps, if you see some ladybugs, if you see some beetles, those are all really good signs that you are actually having a healthy garden. So good job.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us a little lowdown on the bugs that we want to attract. Damien, what kind of questions have come up so far?
Yeah, there's a couple so far. Jack has an issue where bugs are eating his hibiscus and blueberry plants. So Josh, do you have any suggestions on how Jack could accomplish the riddance of those pests?
Yeah, Jack. So bugs are going to eat plants. That's what they eat. So I would say plant more. Plant flowers around it. Sometimes, actually most of the time, the pests come in is because your ecosystem is out of balance, the soil health isn't good, or there's just not enough pollinators around, pollinator flowers is what I mean, or there's just they're just not in the right spot and they're just kind of dying. And any bug really that eats is going to see the weakest plants, that they're like attracted to it just innately. They're going to see all these plants and they're like, oh, this one looks really, really weak, I'm going to attack that. So whatever you need to do, you really need to find some kind of way to improve your ecosystem by adding some pollinators. You said hibiscus and blueberries. Blueberries like really acidic soil. We have a lot of alkaline soil, so you might want to see where your soil is with that, because it just may be weak and they're kind of just seeing that blueberry plant is weak and they're just going after it.
Thanks, Josh. One other question from Leslie Pierpoint. She's got some scale on her Kunti palms and she uses coffee grounds from Starbucks, but she's hoping to your suggestions. What else should she do?
Okay, coffee grounds is going to add nitrogen to the soil, so that's helpful for your soil life. But scale, let's see, which one did I mention has the scale? One of the wasps eats scale, so that's what you want to start attracting is lacewings. So lacewings, I have here, you can plant clover, dandelion, dill, fennel, yarrow. All those plants attract lacewings. So I would plant some of those plants around your problem plant and see if that kind of corrects it. That should be helpful. It takes time for all of this stuff to work. It's not going to be an overnight thing. In fact, I like to just let them kind of just do their thing and correct it over time. So I noticed there's a big population of scale or aphids. I'm going to start planting more plants that attract the beneficial insects to deter that. And then over time, you're going to see reduction in all that. You have to start getting your ecosystem into balance, and that takes some time.
Thank you. G6 has a question in reference to the squash bugs and borers and a few small red bugs that cover his peas but need some help. So any suggestions for him or her?
Yeah, so squash, those bugs, those are tough. I would say start growing them up on something, put them on a trellis, get them off the ground, get some airflow in them, and that should be helpful. Plant more pollinators, and like I said, you're gonna lose some plants to pests and disease as you're putting your system into balance, but once it's there, you'll notice like nothing is being eaten up, nothing is falling of disease, and that's because you now have the proper amount of pollinators and the proper amount of beneficial insects and soil health working together. So I would say, but yes, grow up and see if that helps with the borers.
All right, I think let's take like 2 more and then we'll get back to the rest of the presentation. Debbie Mahaney is asking, and I want to know too, where do you get your ladybug larvae?
Where do you get? Okay, ladybug larvae, you plant clover, dandelion, dill, fennel, yarrow, hairy vetch, marigold, Queen Anne's lace. Planting those plants are going to attract ladybugs, and then they are going to bring their own larvae. I'm not a big fan of buying in ladybugs, especially if it's not in like a greenhouse, because you're basically going to put them on the plant and they're just going to fly away unless you have the pollinators to keep them there. And I think it's easier to just attract them in by planting the specific plants on your yard and watch them come in. There are a ton of plants that attract beneficial insects. And the beneficial insects that I went over are just a very, very few amount. The handout that you guys are going to get is just a very small percentage. A very small percentage of what is possible using plants to attract the beneficial insects. Sorry about that.
Do you have any suggestions on how to get rid of lubbers? Bobby's having a problem in her neighborhood. She's asking for some help. So.
Yeah, the lubbers, those are the tough ones. Yeah, which wasp did I say ate the actual? So they get them when they're small. So you want to try and bring in
Diggers?
The diggers, right, exactly. So you want to attract diggers, and they will, I've seen them actually do it too. They'll get when lubbers are first, you know, growing, they're little, and then that's when the diggers will get them. Once they start getting too big, then it's going to be, they're not really going to get them. You're going to kind of have to do that on your own. But the lubbers will dissipate as well as your property comes into balance. So,
All right.
You know how to get rid of white flies. One last question before we go on.
White flies, I'd say the same thing, you know, just, I don't have anything specifically that talks about white flies, but I guarantee you there's a plant that takes care of it, that brings in that beneficial insect. So I would say maybe research a little bit. Gaia's Garden is an amazing book, and Toby Hemingway put in a huge list of beneficial insects and bugs, and just that, I think it's like 5 pages, is actually super helpful in getting a really strong garden by just using pollinators, specific pollinators. So that's what I say to that one. Sorry.
All right. Well, those were great answers, and we'll have some more questions as we go along. But now you're going to show us some of the plants, right? Okay,
yeah, so let's go for a walk around this beautiful garden. You got some people gardening over here, which is super cool. The plot that I'm going to talk about. But so what do some of these, like, if you don't know? So here we have a chamomile. Chamomile brings in the diggers, the digger wasps, and it's also a great tea. And it's a beautiful plant, and you can see that it has these specific type of flowers. And so once you start to notice what the actual pests go on, then you'll notice what flowers you'll start recognizing them. So I'm gonna show this flower. Is it cool if I show off your celery over here, guys? You're on the garden club, Jacksonville. Hey. So I'm going good. I'm gonna show off your celery here. This umbellify, actually, it's really cool that you let this bloom, because this flower specifically attracts beneficial insects that keep away pests. Parsley, celery, maybe parsley. Yeah, you're parsley, you're right. Definitely not celery. Okay. What were you looking for these umbellifys? You're looking for this specific flower that comes off like this, one shoot, and then a whole bunch of other ones come off of it. And that's called umbellify, and they kind of look like a little umbrella. So fennel does this, dill does this, and these are actually like some of the best ones to have around and let bloom. So another thing to note really is to allow some of your stuff to go to flower, and all, not only beneficial, but you're also gaining seeds for your garden for the next year. And then you have zinnias. Someone already knows the trick, and they're putting out awesome pollinators, these beautiful zinnias, and they attract pollinators to help pollinate their plants. Here's another example. This is dill. This is another example of an umbellify, where it kind of comes out and then shoots off into these separate flowers, and then they shoot off again into more flowers on each little node, which is really cool. So that's another example of umbellify. Having rosemary in your garden is also going to be a good deterrent to pests as well, because the strong scent of rosemary, herbs, alliums, they keep away the pests. Pests don't really like those strong smells. And this person has a lot of alliums over there kind of growing, a big rosemary bush. They got the umbellify's pollinator, and then they have all these beautiful They even have lavender at the end. All these tomatoes just about to go crazy. A bunch of blooms on them. And then I like to show this one. It's basil, because there's a lot of bee activity on this one basil. There's a wasp right there doing its, probably can't see it, but it's trying to find something to land on. So those are a few examples of flowers that are really beneficial to your garden and that will keep your garden nice and healthy and pollinated. And, you know, they just do the work while you sleep. Those are the hard workers right there.
Well, hey, Joshua, speaking of the basil leaves, Mitchie's got a question. She's got tiny ant-like pests eating her basil leaves, as well as a few lavender flowers on her lavender plant, and she's wanting to add more flowers to her garden. What would you recommend she do to help balance that mini ecosystem she has going on there?
She has small ant-like things eating her basil leaves. I don't know exactly what kind of pest. It could be a lot of different things. But I would say try what it is, and then try and find the natural, the flower that attracts its predator. It's hard to say without knowing exactly what it is. But if you don't know, if you just want to do something, I would say just start planting pollinators in your garden, or letting some of your herbs go to bloom, and then you'll actually have some help, hopefully. Are there any other questions?
Awesome. No, we're getting some feedback. Lizzie Pierpoint mentioned that for white flies, she hangs yellow sticky traps near the affected plants, and that works for her.
You do that, yeah.
So, yeah.
That's not bad. I don't really like to kill them, because I just feel like, you know, they're adding, when you're letting your plants kind of die and kind of happen, you just let life happen, you're creating a more resilient plant. So I kind of try and lean towards letting them become resilient instead of trying to kill a pest or something like that. Plant a little bit more basil if you just want a lot of basil. That's the kind of route that I usually take with the plants.
Josh, is that purple basils around somewhere you could show us? Because that was a good example of letting some of it flower.
Yes, yeah, that's the one I was showing you with the bees. I'll walk back over there. Let's see.
And on your way back over there, we have one other question coming in from Debbie Mahaney.
Okay.
And she too has an ant problem, tiny little ants all over her yard. And she's tried a lot of pesticides, and they're not working, but she's hoping that you could tell her what she could use.
You probably have a grass yard and it might be really cut a lot. I would say start adding wood chips. Ants don't really like to be smothered. And when I put wood chips all over my yard, I found that the ants moved to the edges of the wood chips. So if you want to try something, I would try doing that. But that's kind of like a commitment of transforming your yard, getting rid of your grass, putting in, you know, an alternative like perennial peanut or something like that. So yeah, the ants don't really like all that carbon. They tend to like kind of move away and hang out at the edges, from my experience. So I hope that helps.
So what are we looking at now? What's that?
This is nasturtium. I think Denise is muted. This is nasturtium, and this is a really good plant to have for a pollinator. You can actually eat the leaves and the flowers on these guys, and they're delicious. But really, they're acting as a function to attract pollinators to your garden. It's really good. Sweet. sweet and spicy.
So there's got to be some good soil in there that all these plants are growing in.
There is, yeah, they're doing pretty good with the soil. Yeah, to start talking about soil life, it's really important to keep your soil in your garden. It's going to keep moisture in your soil so you're not going to water as much. And it also attracting a ton of microorganisms, insects that create life in soil. So this soil here is moist, but it's not covered, so you can see that it's really dry on top. And I think it's really important to cover your garden with leaves or some straw or hay like this person did. I like this garden, this plot, because they covered it. It's nice and moist under here. And if I dig long enough, yeah, there's already more bugs that I can see kind of in here compared to the other one just across the way. So
Hey,
all
Joshua,
this stuff helps.
Joshua.
What is it? Yes.
Your audio is cutting out a little bit when you started
Okay.
talking about soil health. So maybe you can repeat some of what you were saying.
Okay, so I was talking about the difference between this, having your soil uncovered, and you can see it's dry and not much life happening in there, compared to this style where you have your garden actually covered and you're keeping moisture in. And you can, this is very lightly covered. You could actually like triple the amount of, because all this straw is going to break down and turn into really good soil anyways. So you can add a whole bunch of it. And this will keep your soil moist. It'll attract insects and microorganisms, and that will start to build your soil and your soil life. And that's really what you see garden. You want to see a bunch of creeping and crawling around in there. And you don't really achieve that with this. A lot of exposure here, unfortunately. But here is what you want to see. More coverage on your garden. Even looks prettier too. Keeps the weeds away too. This one has a lot of weeds kind of hanging out, and this one is just like suppressing a bunch. But I like to use leaves on mine. It's easier. People do all the hard work for me, and it's free. They just put it on the side of the road and they rake it, put it in bags. It's awesome. So kind of going into soil and how to boost your soil, there is one type of fertilizer that I do like, and it's called compost tea. And basically what compost tea is doing is you're taking good compost from your garden or from that you buy from around town, and you are basically creating a spray, a foliar spray, to spray on top of the plants and the soil. And what that does is it actually creates it's taking all the beneficial aspects of your compost and exploding it. And so a definition from, if you really want to get into compost tea and composting, Dr. Elaine Ingham is the lady you want to look into. She has a class that's super scientific based, where you actually get a microscope and you look at the compost that you make and you identify the very few creatures that we know. If you take a handful of soil, there's so much life in there that you wouldn't believe. And so we only know a few of the animals, the microorganisms that are in there. So she teaches you how to identify and tell you if you're doing good or if you're not, by identifying the microorganisms. And she defines, that's Dr. Elaine Ingham, yep, Soil Food Web. And she defines compost tea as a liquid produced by extracting bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes from compost. So when you make compost, she has a specific way of doing it. She does the thermal compost where you get it really hot, but you can do it kind of with just decent compost. But the better the compost is, the better your compost tea is going to be. And basically, you take a bag that has like a mesh bag, and you put compost in there, and then you put it into a bucket. Then you have you fill up with water, and you have to aerate. You have to aerate that that water with the same amount of volume of air as there is water. So it needs a lot of air, a lot of volume of air, bubbling a lot for like a day. And she has all the specifics on how to do that the right way, but it's really easy to do once you figure it out and once you have good compost. And then what you do with that is you basically take it and just put it into one of those foliar pumps and spray it on top of your plants. And that is going to boost the amount of microorganisms, and that's what's going to get your garden kind of moving really fast, as opposed to doing it the other way, which is just adding carbon and, you know, putting dead plant material down and kind of growing it that way. This kind of like boosts it, and then you're going to have a garden that's going to explode and do really well. So that's the natural fertilizer that I use. And I don't really use anything else. If there's not compost tea, then I kind of just let nature play its role and learn from that and try and do better the next time around, or I continue or fix it at that point or something like that. So, you know, that's an important aspect to keep in mind. A couple benefits of using compost tea, when all the food web organisms are in the tea, are improved plant growth, improves the nutrient retention of the soil, which stimulates the plant growth, increasing the nutrients available to the root system, which leads to a stronger, healthier plant. And that kind of is talking about, you can have, Elaine Ingham is saying that every soil around the world has all the nutrients and minerals in that soil to grow healthy plants. The plants just have to access it. And the roots have to be able to absorb all of that, all those minerals and all those things that they need to grow. And what microorganisms do is they break down that barrier for the plants so that they can start getting that nutrients into their system. Compost tea also assists in reducing the negative impact that chemical-based pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers have on beneficial microorganisms in the city. So it's also repairing anything that you've done. So if you've sprayed and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to stop spraying, you know, I don't want to do that anymore, compost tea helps counteract that and actually fix that problem. And it improves the intake of nutrients by increasing the foliar uptake. So plants actually, someone described it as, plants are like antennas, and they're just absorbing all this stuff more than just photosynthesis. They're absorbing nutrients and all these things from the air as well as the ground. So plants have all these ways of, you know, bringing in nutrients, and foliar is actually a faster way to get those nutrients into the plant. So compost tea, that's a really short analysis of compost tea. It can get pretty intense and deep, especially if you start listening to Elaine Ingham. But just, you know, do it the right way. Make sure you have a lot of oxygen. You want to keep it aerobic. Once it goes anaerobic, you're bringing in pathogens. You're bringing in things that will actually damage your garden. So you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way. Otherwise, you can actually have a really bad adverse effect. So that's a little bit about compost tea and soil health and how you can start creating that balance in your ecosystem by using something really simple.
That's really great, Joshua. One of the things that I thought is so interesting about compost is that it is a healing tool to, like, you know, it can actually improve not just regular soil, but it can actually take away some of the damaging elements that are in soil. So it's an amendment that can actually start to heal the soil that you have.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, nature is so much more resilient than we give it credit. And everything that we have done here, nature is trying to fix all the time. That's what weeds are doing. That's what bugs are doing. That's what trees are doing. Everything is trying to go back to this wild nature. So it's really important to work with nature, work with it, than try and just block it completely, because it's never going to work. In fact, the citrus groves down south have tried, with the greening, have tried all these different chemicals and biocides and bio insects that they create to try and kill that little teeny wasp or whatever it is. And what they're finding to work best at solving the problem is actually a ground cover. Having a solid ground cover underneath those groves, bringing in the insects that predate on that greening bug, and now they're finding that it's reducing the amount of greening a lot. So nature is the answer pretty much always in my book.
That's
How
great.
do you, Josh, how do you feel about fish emulsion? That was one of the questions that came in while you were speaking.
Yeah, fish emulsion, that's a good question. You need to be careful of where it's coming from, how they're creating the fish emulsion. Elaine Ingham actually touches upon this, and a lot of that fish emulsion is byproduct, and it's basically has no nutritional health at all. So the best fish emulsion to get is go fishing and then use your own fish and create your own emulsion. Same with the algae and the seaweed and all that stuff. Not much here on the seaweed, but if you can find a reputable source, try and get it's the same as food. Try and get it as the least amount of, transformations, the better it's going to be for, the more healthy it's going to be for your plants and whatever you're trying to do with it. But yeah, that's a good question. Thank you.
So the less processing, the better.
Say that again, Denise.
Less processing. That's it.
Less processing, yeah. Ellen Castle also wanted me to let you know that she has one of your Okinawa spinach plants in her garden. And she thinks it's Okinawa, but she wants to know if you can confirm that for her.
Does it have purple on the bottom? Is it green and purple? If it's green and purple, it's Okinawa. And I hope that you got it from one of my propagation station setups that I did. And I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, man, I wonder how those are doing. So good. Awesome.
I have one.
Yeah, good. That spinach is amazing. It's a perennial. If anyone doesn't know, it's a perennial. It's beautiful, and you can get one plant. Each of your Jack sells them, and you can propagate them forever and share them and grow them, and they grow into a kind of like almost like a hedge, like a small hedge, and you have all this spinach to eat year round, and it's delicious. It's super healthy compared to the spinach you buy at the store. And it's really cool to just watch grow. It has these really crazy looking flowers. So really, really awesome plant. One of my favorites. So I'm glad it's working for you.
I think I got it at the last art walk, maybe before everything went crazy. Because it was like, was it February?
The downtown one with the green chamber?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But cool. Good. I'm glad you got one. I gave a lot that way that day. That was really fun.
Yeah. Any other questions, Damien?
I think I may have maybe missed one. Lisa made mention of a squash that she had. She too is having some ant problems. And there was a small ant that one squash is doing really well, but right next to it, there's a squash that sort of got decimated. And she was wondering if she needs to sacrifice the whole squash plant, or what are your recommendations when you have like a really good piece of fruit or vegetable growing and then right beside it, you got something that's not doing so well, but that may be caused by pest control?
There's pests on it, or it just looks damaged?
Let's see. I believe it looks damaged.
Okay, well,
it's just one. It's one of the squash, not the whole bunch.
Well, let them just hang out with that one. If you take away the damaged one, they're gonna look for another one that's damaged. So I would say they're going inside the branches. I would say leave it and let them attack that one and hope they don't spread to the other ones, and then plant some more flowers, and then next season make sure you have your pollinators nice and thick, and you should be able to get less pests and you know, maybe it won't attack, or maybe it will attack less. So yeah, that's you know, you have to start like kind of thinking like a pest. You know, you have to think, okay, this pest is attacking this one plant, but there's all these other ones around it. If you take away what it's eating, it's going to go for something else. It's not going to eradicate the problem. They're going to be there.
You need a sacrificial squash.
It's a sacrificial squash, exactly. So you want to plant more than what you expect to harvest for that exact reason. You're going to have sacrificial plants that just get eaten. And that's why you plant a little bit extra, so you don't have to worry too much about, you know, your one tomato plant and that's the only tomatoes you get. You want to have 10 tomato plants, so then that you have, okay, you have more chances of getting tomatoes. And you can have different varieties. It doesn't have to be all the same variety. You know, and then you'll start realizing what varieties are doing really well here. And if you have a variety that just like catches on and does so well and doesn't have pests, save those seeds, because now you have a really strong variety. And then you plant those next year, and then you should have pretty similar response, where it grows really well, you don't have a lot of pests, and you save those seeds again. And then that's how you create a really heirloom type of plant, by saving seeds from really strong plants.
So we had a question about how do I get my hands on that spinach that you just mentioned?
That's right.
Well, you can find friends who has Okinawa and ask for some cuttings. Each of your Jax sells Okinawa. I don't really know anybody else who sells it. There's some here in the garden. If you know anyone in the garden that has it, you can ask them for a couple cuttings, but it's super simple to propagate. Literally, you cut it, you take all the leaves off, you put it in some soil, keep it moist, and it's gonna root and it's gonna grow, and you'll see new buds popping out. I spread them everywhere. I give them to my parents, I give them to my friends. I want everyone to have bushes of Okinawa. And there's longevity spinach and Vietnamese spinach that also do the same thing. They're a little bit different, but they also are super easy to propagate. Nice, black Cherokees.
I got one more question. Leslie Pierpoint grew black cherry tomatoes all winter, and black Cherokees, sorry, in the winter, and Vietnamese spinach is still going, and also the black cherry variety as well.
Cool. They're still producing. Awesome. I love it. Those are really good tomatoes.
All right. Well, Joshua, how about give us kind of your summation and tell us a little bit about NativeJax and the work you're doing with NativeJax.
Sure. Yeah. So I opened up NativeJax a couple years ago now because I wanted to really steward the earth, and I really am really passionate about creating a more resilient environment. And the way we do that is by working with nature and not trying to work against it. I've traveled all over the world, to Australia, to Costa Rica, and I've studied under some really amazing teachers. I'm doing another permaculture design course in Vermont in July that I just signed up for with Ben Falk, who wrote Resilient Homestead, which is an amazing book. And I'm always trying to keep learning permaculture design. And basically, if you want any part of your yard, or if you want to just learn how to be more resilient, permaculture does branch out outside of gardening. Permaculture actually transpires through your entire life. It goes into community. It goes into how we think, what we're doing. There's an amazing book called Retro Suburbia, which really kind of exemplifies what permaculture can do in an urban setting. And since I'm here in an urban setting, that's my main focus of permaculture and what I'm doing. I'm trying to design people's properties to be more resilient. And since I've been in real estate for 5 years, I incorporated that aspect to with my real estate. So I'm not just a typical realtor. I'm a realtor that's also going to help you find a property that is going to help you grow a really good garden, that has good soil, that has something to work with. I really think that the way we think about real estate is changing, and the way that we are going to be looking at properties in the future is not going to be solely based on location and size of the house and the size of the property. It's going to be also how healthy is my soil? What is already growing here that I can work with in a food security type of mindset. So I think it's really important to know more about what we're doing every single day, be conscious and mindful of how we live our lives. Permaculture has 3 ethics that I follow. Every permaculturist follows. It's care of earth, care of species, and return of surplus. And that's in my mind every second of every day with everything I do. So permaculture is just an amazing platform that really kind of shows you all the opportunities that you can create by just thinking a little bit differently, by working with nature, by thinking a problem is a solution instead of just trying to eradicate a problem. So you know, I could talk a really long time about permaculture. You know, I'll stop it there. But if you have any questions, if you need any consultations, or if you are just curious on what I can do, or if you're ready to put a garden in, and if you're ready to do a garden, I like to call it, which is your whole entire yard is now going to be a garden. It's a perennial garden, so you're going to have food year round. If you're interested in getting a tree guild, you can check me out on NativeJax.com. All my information is there. You can contact me. I will definitely get back to you pretty fast. And you know, I think that we're finally realizing the importance of nature these days, which I love.
Yeah. Speaking of gardens, Josh, Mitzi Saul's got a question in reference to convincing her homeowner association that using permaculture philosophy. Any suggestions for her?
Yeah. So so the state law trumps the HOA in terms of you can have a front yard garden. I would love to, because I come across this problem a lot, and I'm like, let me go to a HOA board meeting. Let me talk to them. Let me explain to them the importance of a ground cover versus grass. You know, being in real estate, I've had a couple instances where someone's buying a house and the HOA is telling the buyer they have to replace the whole grass. They have to put all new sod down because there's a couple little damaged areas, and they're relentless. They don't care. So I am willing and able, I would love to educate them. I would love to let them know that what they're doing is really killing the environment, and that it is possible to have a beautiful, you know, consistent look with grass alternatives. So if, you know, the HOAs, you can put your front yard garden in if that's where, if that's what you have, the law, you know, lets you do that. A garden, I don't know, depends on how strict your HOA is. You might need some type of checking off, which I would love to go through the process and help with that. But yeah, I mean, got to be creative with that and plant stuff they may not even realize is a garden. That's what I like to do. That's the easiest way sometimes.
Well, that's great, Joshua. And Ellen Castle says, this is so true, especially if we continue to have stay-at-home orders, to make sure that our home and our environment is appropriate for the things that we need to grow to survive. Absolutely.
Support your local farms, your you know, get involved with the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. Support your local cattle farms as well. You know, those guys, they're losing a lot of their products, their animals, and they're just kind of disposing them because they aren't either allowed to sell them, or they're just they don't know how to do it. You know, a lot of these farmers just rely on selling them to the middle person who actually takes them and then breaks them down and really kind of processes it and then puts it into your table. So it's really a complex thing. The government has a lot of things to work out with that. But support your local farm. You know, I think Ram's opening up this Saturday. Get to know your farmers, talk with them, ask what they do, ask if they're using pesticides, ask them what they're coming up with, what do they need help with. You know, I think there's a couple farmers, cattle farmers that come to Ram, you know, and get to know them, search them out, do research, and really support those guys over just going to the grocery store and buying, you know, meat from who knows where and from how many different animals. If you want to find a really amazing resource on meat production, look up Polyfaith Farms. Joel Salatin is one of the most amazing people. He gets it, and he's giving the message out on how to really think about where you're getting your meat from. And it's kind of scary once you listen to some of the things that he says, but he's doing it the right way. He's up somewhere in the northeast. I don't know exactly where off the top of my head, but he's kind of close by. He's on this coast.
Got one last question coming from Lisa as well. Thank you so much for the info. For those of us who are looking to convert the garden areas, convert their grass to cover the ground, ground peanuts, where would you suggest they start? Should she hire somebody or should she do it herself?
It's up to you. You know, how much work do you want to do? It's really cheap to turn your yard into perennial peanut or a different. Some people have wet yards, and clover does well wet yards. Imagine having a ground cover of mint, or you know, some other type. There's sunshine mimosa. There's all different kinds of ground covers. Perennial peanut is the easiest to get kind of a hold of, and sunshine mimosa is probably the next. But what you want to do is, it doesn't take a lot of work either, but you want to start suffocating your grass. And my favorite method of suffocating grass is cardboard and wood chips. So save up all the cardboard you can, source some cardboard, lay it all down really thick. You can get free wood chips from a tree company if you call and find one close to you, and put a really thick layer of wood chips over your cardboard. And then kind of just don't do anything for a little bit. Let that decompose and start turning into soil. And then find a source for the turf, eco turf. You actually kind of want the rectangle square, you know, the rectangle shapes instead of the potted ones, I feel do better. And then, you know, kind of just lay a little bit of soil down on top of it, put the perennial peanut square on there, keep them watered. They're kind of finicky at first, but once they're like in there, they're pretty good. You don't have to mow as much. You don't have to water as much. They're nitrogen fixing. They have beautiful yellow flowers that are edible year round. And when it gets a little bit, you know, too much, you mow it, you know, or you edge it. So they're really easy to keep control, and they're beautiful. San Marco has them all over the place in the median. So if you want to see what it looks like, just drive through San Marco, and all stuff you're seeing underneath the tree, perennial peanut.
Cool. I'll look for that. All right, Joshua, I want to tell everybody that they can download your handouts. Damien is going to put the link in the chat, and we'll be sending this out afterward to all the people who attended as well. But it's a handy little handout that Joshua has put together for us. So take advantage of that, so that you can find some of these things that will attract beneficial insects.
Awesome. Yeah.
Also, want to thank you, Joshua, for giving us a lot to think about, for being such a fount of knowledge, and so passionate as well, and being a good friend too. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for everything. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Wanted to tell everybody about a few programs that are coming up. One is our next virtual program is going to be a virtual tour of the Arboretum, the Jacksonville Arboretum. We're working with Dana Duty and the volunteers that make the Arboretum, Jacksonville Arboretum and Gardens, such a fantastic place to visit. And we're going to be doing that at 5:30 on June 18th, which is a Thursday evening. So please join us for that. There's a link that Damien is adding to the chat for that. There's also a Gardening for Pollinators series of online classes being offered by the UF IFAS Extension Office. And you can enroll through August 15th. It's just $15. And one of the instructors is our Clay County Horticulture Extension Agent, Wayne Hobbs. So many of you might know who Wayne is. And so definitely check that out for $15. You'll get hours of instruction and fun activities. So that's a fun thing to keep you busy this summer. Also wanted to just mention that you could become a garden club member, and we depend on membership to keep us going, to show support of our programs, and also to keep us going during this challenging time that we face. So we would love it if you would consider being a member of the garden club, or you can also give it as a gift. So there's also a link being added to the chat for that as well. And yet another thing, we want to find out how you're doing with these programs, what you think of our programs, what you think of the time and days that we're doing the programs, and what other topics you would like us to cover. So please take the survey. The link is in the chat, and we'll also be sending that out afterward. So thank you for helping us by taking that survey, because we can't do these without your feedback. Once again, I want to thank the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund for helping us launch these programs and making them a reality. And I want to thank all of you for being here this evening, for spending your Friday evening with us. I hope maybe you had a glass of something while you were taking part in this. And I want to thank you, Damien.
You're so welcome.
And thank you, Josh. And you guys have a great weekend, great Memorial Day weekend.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.